Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rise Above the Grind with your hostess, the Consultress, Alissa Bickar here, bringing you amazing conversations with awesome people who have, in fact, risen above the grind. And what do we mean when we say the grind? As an entrepreneur, it's any time where you feel you're hitting an upper limit, you're frustrated, you're upset, or quite frankly, checked out. When has your business maybe run you where you're like, you know what, this isn't fulfilling anymore? And so I'm here bringing you amazing minds who have gone through these very pivots to be able to either scale their business or scale back into what really matters and get rid of the riffraff. So today I have the pleasure and the privilege of speaking to none other than Chad Harris. Welcome to Rise Above the Grind.
Hey, Alyssa, glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely, man. Like we connected in our energy. I love the pizzazz you bring to the table and like the super ebullient. Anyway, I don't know how to say that word, but I know what I mean. When I say like you have this attractive charisma about you, and I know that your business now is in real estate investments and teaching people kind of how to do that based on all the success that you've had and building a portfolio using other people's money and getting started from basically scratch. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you made the pivot into real estate investment and what that kind of transition point or that grind into flow kind of looked like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So I got into real estate an odd way, I guess. I was a missionary overseas. We were living in Kenya and came back to the States for the birth of my youngest son, who's our fourth child. And when he was born, he had health issues. And so we couldn't return to Kenya. So my job was ending. Had to figure out something to do here in the States. And I was familiar with real estate. My parents had had rentals. I just out of curiosity had been listening to podcasts. And when I realized that we couldn't return overseas, I knew I had to do something to pay the bills. And my degree is in teaching. There were no teaching jobs, at least in the Ohio area in 2012, 2013. And so I just decided I was going to be a full-time real estate investor and just went out and started telling people, I'm going to be an investor. I'm going to buy houses. I'm that guy who buys houses. And I noticed something in all those conversations when I would share, this is what I'm doing over and over. People would say, that's amazing. I always wanted to do that. I wish I could do that. And I saw an opportunity where I could allow them or help them to get into real estate like they really wanted by being a lender in my business. And that cash would allow me to buy properties and grow and build a rental portfolio. So I started with no money, no way to borrow money from a bank, and really no active real estate business. I wasn't wholesaling or flipping. I just started buying rental properties and building a portfolio from day one. So that's been about 12 years ago now, and it's been pretty amazing.
I'll say. So you made the pivot from teaching and missionary work into real estate investment because you made a decision. And this is like some of the most profound stuff is sometimes also the simplest is, we torture ourselves sometimes around, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And we get, I know from at least for myself, we get into that exploratory expansion where kind of everything seems like it's up in the air and it's really difficult to make decisions from that point. How did you know that this was the decision you were making? Did you have that kind of all cards on the table moment where you were like, listen, I just got to pick something and go? Or was it like this calling where you're like, nope, I know exactly what's coming next?
That's a great question. Yeah, and it's in all honesty, it's kind of hard to look back and remember what it felt like because there was a lot of pressure at that point, with a son sick and nowhere to, we didn't have a house and no job. There was a ton of pressure. And I think in reality, what it was there was so much pressure on me and so much was out of my control. Uh, I couldn't control my son's health. I couldn't control really uh, the path for my family at that point. And I just wanted to control something. And I believe 100% that if we commit to something, we can figure out a way to make it work or figure out a solution. And so I just committed to it. And I didn't know how it was going to work, right? When I was going out telling people I was buying houses, I had no way to buy houses. I had no idea how I was going to buy houses. But I did know that if I committed to it, I would figure out a way. And so, as I was telling people, most of that was me casting a vision, right? I was trying to convince myself as much as I was share with them. So,
Oh, yeah, and so I just love the honesty in that. It's like, I just spoke it into existence because I made a decision. I didn't wanna keep in that spinning spiral of things that were out of my control. I made a commitment to pursue this idea that I had and just started telling everybody I knew. When we declare something out loud to our family, to our friends, to our network, it creates a life of its own. It's almost like it puts God in control and says, okay, whatever comes next from here, I'm going to keep my feet in motion. I'm going to watch the direction that I get to go in. And so many people, when they come to this space of making this decision and committing to the pivot, um, feel overwhelmed with what if it's the wrong decision? What if? But at the end of the day, the what ifs are the worries that keep us stuck. Like, it sounds like
mm,
very much like you didn't have the bandwidth to give that credence because you had more important things to focus on. It was progress and it was success. Like, you defined really well for yourself. You're like, I'm buying rental properties. This is what I'm doing. The how will show up. And so as a business owner now in this line of work for the last, decade plus, have there been any other times along the trajectory of the business where you felt yourself up against like an innovation point where you were either frustrated, fed up, or downright just like checked out, where you're like, something's got to give, and you made a change from that place, now having been inside of this business for a while?
oh yeah, of course. I felt like at every level, I thought, oh, if I just get a little further, everything's going to get easier, right? But each level we get to, there's just new problems we encounter and new issues to new things to solve. But a couple of my major headache points were, I was buying properties and I was hiring contractors that would work with me. So I was on the job site every day and paying them with money that I was raising from private lenders at the same time, looking for deals all at the same time. And so once I got to about 25 doors, I was just at my bandwidth with dealing with tenants, trying to raise money, handle the renovations, everything, and was just massively frustrated. I was calling potential lenders to set up a meeting, and I sounded desperate, right? Because in my head, I needed that money. I didn't know how I was going to pay my contractors. And it's very hard to raise money when you need the money, right? It's so much easier when the reason you're raising money is because you have a great opportunity and you're putting that lender together with the opportunity, and us as the borrower aren't even involved or part of the discussion. That's the easiest way to raise money. And so at about 25 doors, I realized I had to change. And at that point, I started hiring contractors that could work independently. And so I was stopping at the job site and just checking in and then going and looking at deals and raising money. And once I made that transition, which for me was very difficult because I was using other people's money and I'd never let go of the reins on the renovations. I'd always been there. But once I made that switch, that greatly eased my burden during the day and with the business. And that got us to about 55 doors around there. At 55 doors, I was once again miserable and didn't want to get out of bed, and the stresses were just too much. And I hired a coach at that point, which I should have done a lot sooner, and also hired my first administrative assistant and just handed off a lot of the systems that I was not good at, right? I have my giftings like everybody, and I have things that I'm terrible at. And man, my administrative assistant is really good at all the things that I'm not good at. And once I did that, we fleshed out the systems of the property management. And so we were able to scale again. Life became much easier. And now, I just have administrative assistant, leasing assistant, and good contractors. And I'm very uninvolved in the management of our portfolio. Meet with them about an hour a week, um, and get to spend more time on coaching and speaking and all of the things that really fire me up and get me excited. So,
I I love that. And so these pivot points that I'm hearing, like you hit the grind, like where you're like, something's halting, I'm not fulfilled, or whatever. There, it seems to me that there are very acute identity shifts in those separate pivots. One was going from hands-on on-site with the contractors to more of a oversight managerial role with people who could be independent of you, and then another time where you extrapolated your extracted yourself from the business yet again, and became a new, more refined, more defined role in the business, so that you can attract not only the doing stuff of the business, but to then pay it forward and put an education component onto your business. Now, this may be just like a little bit like open the kimono here, but when you were going through those identity shifts, having to like release the iron grip on who you used to be or who you were up to that point, and needing to make this next innovation, how was that process for you to be able to step into that next identity?
mm. Well, I found that those processes, like any change, aren't real fun, right? It's not real easy.
Right.
It's kind of painful for everybody involved, but necessary. My first coach, it's always interesting because I think I have a tendency, like most people, to think that what will get me to the next level is a new skill or some kind of information. But in actuality, it's a different perspective, right? It's not that we have, if we want to own, let's say, 100 doors and we have 20, well, what will get us there isn't some new app, or it's not one individual new hire. What'll get us there is thinking differently, right? We have to, the person who has 100 doors thinks differently than the person with 20. And if we don't change our thinking, we're just going to always be frustrated. So, um, and me and my coach would butt heads a lot because I was resistant to giving up that old way of thinking. I thought I needed information. He's trying to beat me into to a new perspective, but
Those old patterns die hard, man.
yeah, they really do. They really do. Stubbornness is really beneficial in some ways in business, but in other ways, not so much. But man, once you get that perspective shift, it just unlocks everything.
You
So
know, what gets us here will keep us here if we allow it. And what gets us to that next level, the Einstein quote comes to mind, is we cannot solve problems with the same level of thinking that created them. We need
exactly.
that outside perspective. We need someone who can see the forest for the trees when we're stuck in under the branches. And the perspective that we get the opportunity to get, it is not comfortable. Like leadership and developing your own personal growth, it is not for the faint of heart. If we wanted to stay comfortable, we would also be willing to stay stuck and sacrifice those goals and visions that we had. Like you said, you spoke into existence, like the character of wanting to move through and get to that next level requires courage. It requires looking at the things that are uncomfortable for us to look at. Like, oh man, I really don't want to see that I have been really terrible in this area. And either I have to let it go and not do it, find somebody else to do it who's better than me, but I also have to not be married to the identity of needing to have to wear that hat all the time. For for me going through my family business, that was my mom was in the operational role, kind of doing the crossing the T's, dotting the I's. Dad was out there creating community and seeing everybody through, but his identity was so couched in bringing his bagels everywhere that he went, that there was no way he was selling the bagel stores. Even after
Mhm.
he got the rentals, the commercial real estate, and what have you, and built a marina, like he built multiple businesses, but like in his identity, he could never really give up being the guy who brought bagels everywhere. Fast
Yeah.
forward for me, after his passing, I'm like, well, what the hell do I do? I still embody this legacy of like being generous and creating community, but I had to think differently about it. I moved my family geographically. I started doing my business more online than ever before, but I also had this impulse to give. So how do you give when people are all online? I'm a connector at heart, so I had to figure out a way to be able to give to people the essence of that joy and energy that was the same thing that my dad was doing, bringing bagels to people when let me tell you the story one day about having to bring them on a plane and not being able to check them. Holy cow, the whole plane smelled like everything bagels. But anyway,
Look forward to that.
right? Uh, but the truth is, having your identity be satiated in a way that is still you, but that the way that it expresses is different, takes that open mind, takes looking like for examples in other people and where other people are seeing success. Hell, that's the whole reason why I'm even doing this series, to have people have a new way to think about themselves in business as they evolve, and also in life as we try on these new experimental ways of being and see what really fits. So how can people learn more about you in real estate, and how can they get in contact with you, Chad?
Yeah. You can find me on YouTube at Chad Harris, True Wealth Investors. You can find my podcast, True Wealth Investors Real Estate Podcast. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me about anywhere. So, yeah, I'd love to connect. Glad to share and help other people. I regret that I let my life get so painful before I changed. And I really hope to share information and perspective so other people can make those changes sooner and avoid the pain in the process. So
Uh, Have the discomfort, but don't send yourself to the emotional hospital while you're doing it.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Thanks so much for being here. You saw
Yeah.
here we have a live studio audience. So if you're interested in being a live studio audience, please get in touch with me and let me know. We broadcast every Monday at 7:30 a.m. Eastern time. So click subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and let us know what you found most valuable about this conversation. And we will go now to our live studio audience. We'll see you next time, same bat channel, everyone. Thanks a million, Chad.
Thank you.